Why is it that the same ideological positions are being pushed on everybody from corporations, the media, parliament down the road from here, the church, right? I mean, I could, the NHS, everyone is ad hoc to a particular worldview. And you can even believe that's a great worldview and it's exactly, everyone needs equity and diversity and whatever. How
what
does
is
that
the
happen?
mechanism?
How's that
What is
happen?
the mechanism? There is no more important question. Let me give you an example of a problem that we're all familiar with and the effect in this. And that example is COVID. You'll remember COVID. And you've probably had
I'd rather not remember it.
You've probably had COVID.
Yes.
And so I think it's fairly clearly established. It's not really a right-wing conspiracy theory. It's fairly clear that if it didn't happen, it could have happened. And here's how COVID happens. So first you have SARS-1, which basically jumps from a bat to a palm civet. It's very well established, very nasty disease. And this, SARS-1 is a problem. It almost escapes. It almost becomes COVID, and it kills about 20% of the people that have it. It makes Delta COVID, which was a nasty disease, look like the common cold. It's an important problem. The way science is funded, specifically science, including, for example, virology. Virology is not social science. It's very clearly scientific. It's a hard science. And the principle of the second half of the 20th century, the way that science is funded, is sort of, consistent with this kind of government by experts principle, and the thing about an oligarchy is it almost looks like it's no government at all. It's just like, no, there's no power here. It's just science. It's not power. It's just science. But when you look more closely at power, there's always human beings involved. And so the result of SARS-1 is that virology becomes important, and specifically bat coronaviruses become important. And the way science, having dropped out of my PhD program, but some people think of me as a computer scientist. The way science works is you get funding for things that are important and things that matter. And so within virology, basically, people realized that they could get quite a bit of grants by referring to this very real problem of bat coronaviruses. And they basically said, well, this is a serious problem. We deserve a number of pounds to study it. Mm-hmm. And so they're like, what if this happened again? What if a bat coronavirus emerged? Well, let's go and find all the bat coronaviruses. Let's go to all the bat caves. They literally did this. Let's bring the viruses back. But the problem is these viruses are bat viruses. They don't naturally infect humans, but they could mutate to infect humans. But waiting for them to mutate is a very slow and random process. So what if we mutated them? And what if we trained them? What if we put a furin cleavage site in? What if we trained them to infect, humanized mice? What if we did this in a Chinese laboratory with very poor biosafety conditions? The Wuhan virus that's an American virus because it's funded by American science. These people were literally funded to do this research by American grants. And so when you talk to the virologists who did this, they're like, well, we need to predict the emergence. Well, what happens if you predict it? What do you do? We predicted it, all right. And it's like you find, come home and you find your 10-year-old setting fire to the kitchen curtains. And you're like, why are you setting fire to the curtains? He's like, well, there's a lot of fires in the kitchen. Cooking happens. There are accidents. What if the curtains caught fire? Could we get out? Could the dog get out? So gain of function research, at least in this context, is clearly a bad idea. And yet this bad idea, which, any fool on the street can see is a bad idea, basically succeeds in the marketplace of ideas that, consists of professional virologists with IQs of 150 who've trained for many, many years to study this. And the question of why this bad idea succeeds in the marketplace of ideas is fundamental to the question of why bad ideas, rule our society today and how we tend, the difference between gain of function research and the idea that colleges should discriminate in admissions by the skin color of the people applying to them. They're both equally ridiculous ideas, right? And how do these ridiculous ideas succeed? And when we use words like authoritarianism, which is basically sort of an anti-monarchical word, we're basically looking at the sort of the pathologies of monarchies, which are systems very alien to and very opposed to the kind of oligarchy that runs our democratic societies today. And monarchies, when they fail, when they're bad, and any system of government democracy, oligarchy, or monarchy can be good or bad. Basic point of Aristotle. When bad monarchies distort the marketplace of ideas, it's overwhelmingly by repressing good ideas. And the way that we got here is very different from that. It's by a system that promotes bad ideas. Moreover, it promotes bad ideas not through a sort of conscious monarchical plan. There's no little council of supreme elders or something sitting in a little room saying, we're going to, fund this bad idea because we like bad ideas. That would be better in some ways because it would be easy to get rid of those people. But there's no center. There's no little cabal. There's no dictatorship. There's sort of none of that. There's just a system that structurally rewards these bad ideas. And it structurally rewards these bad ideas, first of all, by separating authority from responsibility. And so, someone like, Fauci, who's almost, a little monarch within this oligarchical structure of process, and who is really, critical in, sort of authorizing and continuing this gain of function research, will never be held accountable. And so you have this kind of division, when bad ideas are accountable, they are not favored in the evolutionary Darwinian contest of ideas. But when you look at the way bad ideas are promoted, and it's simply enough to not have that accountability. And when you don't have that accountability, the attraction of bad ideas, not the sort of repulsive, if you think about like electromagnetic force, you have attraction and repulsion. And what happens is basically you have these bad ideas and they feel good for some reason. Within virology, for example, gain of function research feels good because everyone's doing it. It's the way to get grants. And if you say no one should be doing this, you're basically saying your fellow virologists should not be funded. Ooh. That's going to be hard. Ooh. All right. But the thing is, when you basically extend that outside the circles of experts, essentially, these experts are promoting policies that strengthen power, that reward them. They're like, my field is important. My field matters. More must be done. And then you extend this to sort of the broader world. Where does this sort of culture of victimology come from? Whether you're looking, we talked about communism, progressivism earlier. And if you look at, for example, the Scottsboro Boys case of, which is promoted by communists in the 1930s, you connect that to George Floyd. There's sort of this clear thread there. And there's, providing people with the feeling of saying, I'm the defender of the victim. I am the white knight. I am the paladin. I am standing up, for... And the effect of these ideas may be terrible. I mean, I think the effect of the George Floyd riots on, the African-American community in America is straightforwardly negative. There's very clear social science statistics, massive numbers of deaths from depolicing, right? But that doesn't have an accountability impact on the marketplace of ideas. What impacts the marketplace of ideas is...
to translate what you're saying into simple language, the people who push that narrative didn't get the comeuppance they should have got.
Yes.
They were not delegitimized, discredited.
They were not delegitimized, but they felt that positive feeling of feeling incredibly good about it. Their hearts felt warm. They felt important. They felt like they mattered.
Yes.
They felt like it gave them meaning.
Right.
And so, the sort of marketing that kind of meaning, which is confined in the 1930s to a very small elite set of like American communists, including my forebears, basically becomes mass market in, the sort of George Floyd experience. Now every suburban housewife feels like they matter, like they're standing up. And what they don't realize that's a mechanism that not only promotes bad ideas, the bad ideas displace good ideas, and you get this kind of monoculture, which looks exactly like the kind of monoculture in, at least structurally, I'm not saying whether, it looks exactly like the kind of monoculture that's enforced through repressive means by an authoritarian government such as Nazi Germany. But the mechanism that basically creates that coordination of ideology is promotion rather than suppression. It's attraction rather than repulsion. And it's inevitable in an oligarchical, meritocratic structure of government. And so when these oligarchies were established, you had these marketplaces of ideas. Professors had never been involved in government. The idea that professors should run the government in 1900 was as absurd as saying postmen should run the government. And because these marketplaces of ideas in academia were not corrupted by power, they were flat and they were excellent. And people are like, okay, I have these corrupt politicians elected by, democracy, terrible result. We'll still use the name democracy just as we still use the name monarchy, but politicians are awful, they're corrupt. What about these unbiased, experts? But the thing is, you give power to the experts and power corrupts them. And suddenly they develop these conflicts of interest. They become sort of corrupted. And basically, when you give power to the marketplace of ideas, the marketplace of ideas corrupts itself. And you get basically a world of absolutely terrible ideas.